Ever since we got the most recent trailer for Jedi Survivor, I've been so excited for this game. It looks absolutely amazing, and it feels like that trailer was a very decent summary of what the game is going to be like. We saw a lot of gameplay as well as some little bits of cinematic and stuff like that, and it looks really, really good. But despite all the positive, today's video is going to be focusing a little bit more on the negative side of things, and I want to put this out there straight away. This isn't because I am feeling negatively towards the game. I think it's going to be an absolute banger. This isn't me like trying to rag on the game saying it looks terrible or anything like that, but I do have some slight concerns from the trailer and essentially just from the stuff that we know about the game so far. So with all the positive videos I've done so far, I thought I would balance that out with just slightly touching on those negatives, or essentially just my biggest concerns for the game from everything we know so far. Now, the first thing that kind of stood out to me, and this is obviously going to be explained through the story, and there is also a book coming out, I think, on March 7th. So this will be explained. I know this is a very random thing to be concerned about because it will be explained, but we did not see any of the Mantis crew in the trailer. Or technically we saw Seer, but in terms of Grease and Merrin, we didn't see those guys. And it felt a little bit disconnected in that sense because those are characters that we kind of came to know very well by the end of the game, and it almost felt like that was like the crew. And although obviously Cal is the main character, that was like the main bunch of characters that we know. And so to not see them at all in the trailer is definitely a little bit concerning, just because I don't want them to not really be in the game. They obviously will be in the game. They're not just going to throw those characters out. But even if it is related to the story, I do hope that they're not just like missing for 3/4 of the game and then you have to save them at the end or something like that. I do hope they are still a big part of the game. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2, and the main issue with that game for a lot of people was the fact that you don't really play as the character or really see the characters that we know from the first game for a large chunk of that game. And although a lot of people had other issues with that game, for me personally, that was really my only issue, was that it felt a little bit disconnected in that we aren't really following the same core characters that we know from that first game. So I do hope that we do see a lot of Grease and Merrin throughout Jedi Survivor, and especially Merrin, because I think, let's be honest, we're all big fans of Merrin here. Let's be completely honest about that, boys. And so I do hope that we see those guys. Like I said, I'm sure this will be explained within the story, likely a reason they're missing, they've been captured or something like that. But I just hope that they're not gone from the game for too long, because I have experienced that in other games and it kind of just like takes away from the overall experience. Now, the next thing I have a little bit of an issue with, or I'm concerned about, is who the main villain's going to be in this game. Now, we know by the end of Fallen Order that the Empire, and more specifically the Inquisitors, and even at the very end Darth Vader, they are the ones who are hunting down Cal. They are pretty much the main villains of the game. And then there's obviously like some random villains along the way, like Malicos, for example, who's not really to do with that main storyline. But it was very clear that the Empire was the main villain in Fallen Order. Now, in this trailer, we do really not see any of the Empire. We see some stormtroopers and stuff like that, but most of what it seems like is going to be happening is that this new character that we see holding that like key or whatever that thing is, and presumably the guy in the Bacta tank, he seems like he's going to be, if not the main villain, at least very close to the main villain, maybe something like Malicos, where he's kind of like the final hurdle before the main boss fight. There's also then the Jedi and the other like bounty hunter. Then we also see that other bounty hunter with the yellow saber. And yeah, just felt a little bit disconnected from that first game, because obviously that was almost exclusively focused on the Empire hunting Cal down. Whereas in this, it almost feels like there's going to be two sets of villains. There's going to be like the Empire, because we know the Empire will be after him. We do see some stormtroopers. We see that Imperial Senator in the first trailer. So we know for a fact the Empire is going to be involved. But in this trailer, it almost gave off the vibe that, yeah, the Empire is going to be like secondary, and there's going to be this new group of villains who, yeah, they seem to be very disconnected from that whole storyline. So at the end of the day, if they're good villains, it doesn't really matter, but that is just a slight concern that I've got, that I was kind of expecting like the Inquisitors to be the main villains. Maybe the Ninth Sister comes back, maybe the Grand Inquisitor is in there, the Sixth Brother is on the cover of the book, so it kind of felt like leading into this trailer it would follow very closely from the first game, where obviously the Empire and the Inquisitors are still hunting Cal down very heavily. But now I'm just really not sure who's actually going to be the main villain. And I just hope it doesn't get too, like, jumbled up. I hope that we do still keep that same, I guess, storyline going from the first game, because I don't want this game to feel, like, disconnected from Fallen Order. Now, the next concern I have, and just keep in mind, this is obviously early footage, so what I'm saying right now is essentially nitpicking. I'm not naive enough to think that, like, the game's finished and it's going to be perfect in this trailer. But one concern that I had is that some of the animations throughout the trailer look a little bit clunky. Some of the, like, genuine animations in terms of like when you're doing a finisher on an enemy, for example, they looked very clunky too, but obviously those can be tidied up just a little bit. But even some of the actual gameplay itself looked just very slightly clunky. Now, to be fair, Fallen Order was actually a little bit clunky too. Going back and replaying it now, it definitely has a few little animations and stuff that aren't perfect, and for me it didn't at all ruin the experience of that game. So this is hardly the end of the world. If the gameplay is fun to play, and it looks even semi-decent, then it doesn't really matter. But there were just some animations throughout the trailer, and I'll try and like highlight these as I'm talking about this now. It did definitely just look, yeah, a little bit unpolished, but like I said, this is also very early footage, so they can definitely clean that up, but we are also only a few months away from the game. In fact, at this point, we're like less than 2 months away, so that is just a very slight concern, but like I said, Fallen Order had that too, and to be honest, it didn't really matter all that much. This is, again, more of a nitpick that I want the game to look as, you know, polished and as clean as it can, not because it's a requirement for it to be good, but more because those small little details like that are what takes a game from being really good to being like an elite top tier game, with the prime example being like Fallen Order. It was a very, very good game, but it wasn't quite in that upper echelon. It didn't win Game of the Year, for example, and all those small little elements like that, they do definitely add up. You look at a game like God of War, that game's animations are all so polished that the game just feels essentially perfect when you're playing it, and then when you go and play a game like Fallen Order, it definitely feels just that, I guess, level below in terms of quality. Now, my final concern from the trailer and just what we know of the game so far is that I am a little bit worried that there's going to be not really any evolution of like the travel system from the first game. I've mentioned this in a previous video, but I'm currently replaying the game on stream, and if you guys want to check that out, be sure to turn on your notifications, because I'm going live once a week to play the final playthrough of Fallen Order. But having gone back, and I'm currently at the point where you have to enter the tomb on Zephyr, and it is just so frustrating. It's so hard to find where you're meant to be, and then even when you do find that and you finish the mission and you've got to get back to the Mantis, it is so annoying because there's no option to like fast travel, and it doesn't need to be fast travel, but they could have at least put like all of the mission areas close to the end of the map so that you finish that boss fight, for example, and then just like most other games, you just walk through one door and you're kind of back where you need to be. I feel like most games like that have the big like marquee boss fights, they always end, and then there's always just like a door or a pathway that you go down, and then it's like, oh, we're nearly already back to the ship or whatever. So that is something I'm a little bit concerned about, just because it was genuinely bad in the first game. That's like my biggest issue with the game, the travel, mostly just on Zepho and even a little bit on Dathomir. The rest of the maps are pretty fine, but I just hope that they have improved that, and a lot of people were, you know, hoping that that's why Merrin would be in the game, to sort of follow us around and be able to use her magic to essentially like teleport us back to the ship when we need it. And I thought that would be a pretty cool idea. But yeah, I just hope that they have improved on that. That was literally the single biggest issue in the game for me. Not only the travel, but the actual map that you could bring up and look where you were. That was genuinely terrible. Like, I still don't know how to use that thing at all. It doesn't link little bits together so you kind of know roughly where you need to go, but then you just lose track of where you are. And that was definitely my own biggest issue, and I think a lot of people's biggest issue with Fallen Order. So I really hope they have fixed that. It's very hard to tell obviously from the trailer, but it is something that I just already have concerns with before we'd seen any content from Jedi Survivor. So those are pretty much my biggest concerns with the game so far. Now, like I said, I still think it's going to be an absolute banger. Even if all of these things that I mentioned aren't that great, I still think this is going to be an absolute banger of a game. It looks great so far. I have nothing but faith in Respawn. They literally have not missed yet. Every game they've ever released has been really good. So I don't want this to come across all negative, saying like, oh, this game sucks, it looks terrible. That's not at all the case here. If anything, I'm quite the opposite, and I'm kind of making this video so that not everything I say is just sucking up to the game, because I do think it is good to have a bit of a balance. So those are my concerns. Be sure to leave your own concerns down in the comments and obviously discuss the stuff that I mentioned as well. I'm always keen to hear your thoughts. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and may the force be with you always.